Hey guys, today's Valentine's Day and we're going to make a special bowl of jiro with a bit of a chocolate twist. これが Valentine jiro. Valentine's Day calls for chocolate noodles, so ideally you want to make these the day before and age them in room temperature overnight for a glossier slurp. The specs of the chocolate jiro noodle we're making today are 1% kansui, 38% hydration, 3% cacao powder and no salt. Since the cacao powder is similar to whole wheat in that it absorbs water, hence the higher hydration takes that into account. First, you want to aerate the flour and mix in the cacao powder extremely well. Then, you can proceed to add the kansui slowly, mixing vigorously to ensure that the flour has been evenly hydrated before adding the next round of kansui. Once again, if you don't have a large bowl, I recommend starting with 200 to 300 grams of flour to ensure sufficient space in the bowl for aeration during mixing to evenly distribute the kansui. Once all the kansui has been incorporated, you want to continue mixing for at least 15 to 20 minutes to ensure an even mix. When your chocolate-colored sobro looks like this, where the flour feels evenly hydrated to the touch, you can now transfer it into a Ziploc bag, where we will first spread out the sobro evenly, then using your feet to step the sobro into a cohesive sheet. Make sure to flip the bag over and give both sides a good stepping to achieve a sheet that is as even as possible. After stepping, let the dough sheet rest for 1 hour to relax the gluten. After resting, you want to cut open the bag and carefully release the sheet onto a cutting board. Then halving it lengthwise so that the width of each sheet can fit into the marcato. First, use a rolling pin to lightly thin the sheet out. Then, take each half and roll them into marcato from setting 0 to 4 without skipping any dials. Repeating the same for the other sheet. For the first lamination, you want to stack the two rolled out sheets on top of each other and press down to combine. Then, rolling out carefully, making sure to occasionally clear out the overlapping dough sheet from the bottom so that the exit isn't congested. Keep repeating the process by starting from setting 0 and roll to setting 4, then fold to laminate and the cycle continues. As you make each lamination, try to feel out the dough using the marcato as the sheet passes through your rollers. You will also see line gluten gradually developing, both of which are good signs for gluten development. Since we're making jiro-inspired noodles today, we want the final texture of the dough sheet to be relatively stiff, and personally, I did 4 laminations. After that, let the dough sheet rest for 30 minutes by rolling it up onto a rolling pin and wrapping it in your broken Ziploc bag. For cutting, we're going to use the Trinette cutter today. For the final thinning, I rolled the sheet to the 4th setting for thicker noodles, but feel free to adjust based on your preferences. Then, feeding the thinned out sheet through the cutter, in which we are not deliberately aiming for a reverse cut. Lengthwise, longer is not better in jiro, so I went for around 26 centimeters. Measure and cut, then dust with starch. Finally, you want to give a light temomi for that washi-washi-kan. Portion size is up to you, but anywhere around the 250 gram mark is a good portion, if you can handle it. For today's soup, I have some beautiful British beef bones, which we are going to toss into a pot with some pork bones in a 1 to 2 beef to pork ratio. For jiro, it is important to have a good mix of femurs for the collagen and meaty areas like back or neck bones for the umami. Then, you want to add enough water to fully cover the bones and bring the soup up to a boil. Then, down to a low simmer, skimming all the scum that rises to the top for 20 minutes. Make sure to stir the bones to release any scum that cannot surface. When all of the dark scum has been skimmed off, turn down the heat to a low simmer and cook for ideally around 13 hours. If you're making this soup, I also recommend taking some of the tender beef off the bone and saving them for toppings later. Around 5 hours prior to serving, you can add the pork back fat, which takes around 3 to 4 hours to soften depending on the temperature of your soup. Then, add the chashu at around 4 hours prior, cooking for 2 to 3 hours depending on the size of your log or chunk. After the chashu is tender, take it out and steep in the kaeshi for 1.5 hours. Then, taste the soup for umami and add more meat or bones if needed. When the abura has softened, transfer into a bowl and mash using a whisk. Then, season with kaeshi and MSG to taste. Try to do this as close to serving time as possible, as you want maximum freshness. Jiro soup is all about timing, as after all, we're working with fresh soup. So, I'll place a rough timeline in the description if you want an example for reference. Since we're making jiro, I'm going to stick to the jiro nomenclature and use the term kaeshi, which is going to be composed of these ingredients. kikkoman koikuchi shoyu, kikkoman marudaiju shoyu, apple cider vinegar, mirin, and red wine. Both the alcohols we're going to reduce until syrupy. Finally, mixing all of these ingredients together with some leftover kaeshi from my last gyro session. To make the beef bourguignon short ribs, first we're going to sear off the beef in a Dutch oven. Remove them once they're nicely colored on all sides, and add the veg and sweat for a few minutes. Once the mirepoix is softened, add some tomato paste and continue cooking until you build a good amount of fond on the bottom of the pot, which we will deglaze with red wine to release the fond. Then, turning the heat on high and reduce until the wine turns syrupy. Once reduced, add some milk, water or stock, as well as any seasoning you'd like. I did some herbs, oyster sauce, fish sauce, and some shoyu. After seasoning, return the short ribs into the sauce and transfer into a 180-degree oven uncovered and braise for 1 hour. After the 1 hour, you can use your chopsticks to gauge the tenderness. What I'm aiming for is a soft yet snappy steak-like texture. And once they're at your desired texture, turn the ribs meat side up and return to the oven to roast and develop a dry, crispy crust on the exterior. Once you've achieved that crust, remove and set the ribs aside. For the braising liquid and mushroom veg mixture, transfer everything into a blender and blend until smooth. Then, return to a pot and reduce until a deeply flavored paste is formed. And this is the paste that will go into the bottom of our bowl. Now, for arguably the most important aspect of gyro, the garlic. If you have a blender, I strongly recommend using it. But if you don't, you'll just have to practice your knife skills like me. I've got to film the yasai, but just wash the moyashi, cut the cabbage, and set aside. Just before serving, cut the buta into either slices or chunks depending on your preferences. For the short rib, slice them into thick chunks as well. And now that everything is ready, let's put a bowl together, shall we? Hey Miranda, how's the chocolate ramen?
So it was a surprise. It wasn't sweet.
Yeah.
But definitely there was some color. Like definitely it was chocolate looking. It was really good. Yeah. Did not expect. I thought it had like hints of sweetness. That was not there at all. It was just savory. But it was really nice. Really like filling portion as well. And today there was like the beef.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The short
rib. Really good. Yeah.
Thank you.
Really good.
I'll see you next time.
We'll be back.
For sure.